My name is Lean Tran Layton, and I'm a practicing immigration attorney in the United States. And I'm an immigrant myself. Throughout my life and career, I've had the privilege of meeting people from all over the world who have immigrated to the United States. And I've heard some amazing stories, and I want you to hear them too. These stories will make you feel a range of emotions, but most of all, I hope you will be left feeling inspired. Welcome to the Immigrant Voice. If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast, share it with others and leave us a comment or review wherever you're listening to it. Also, remember to subscribe so you can hear our upcoming episodes. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to talk to you as I am with all of my guests. I love hearing everyone's stories and just more about who they are. So tell the listeners your name and where you currently live, and also, of course, what country you were born in.
Yeah, so my name is Cesar. I currently live in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I was born in the Dominican Republic.
How old were you when you came here?
So I came to the U.S. when I was 4 years old.
Do you remember anything about the Dominican Republic?
Before I came here?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There were a couple of tidbits, right? I was really young. One thing that I remember, so we used to have a house in the Dominican Republic, and the backyard was like it's like dirt and rocks and stuff like that. And I used to remember like playing in that backyard with this like red truck, like this red like play truck. It was pretty interesting. And then that was one memory. I think my other memory that I had was I used to have a red bike, and I used to ride it around all the time. And I used to always sing that like the mosquitoes sting. And I would just drive around the house just like saying that stuff. So those were a couple of the memories that I had before we moved to the US.
Do you remember the house that you lived in? Any details of it?
So well, now I've gone back, so so the details are there. I mean, it was a one-story house. So we used to live with my dad's uncle. So he used to have a hardware store, like a block down. And then, the block where the house was at, we stayed at in a section of the house, and he stayed in the other section. So that's where we used to live before we moved to the US.
Now, do you remember actually coming to the US, like the very first time?
So it's interesting because and I was very young, right? So like these memories are like, it's crazy because they're like vivid and I can just see them in my head. But the first memory that I have coming into the US was coming out of the airport and seeing my dad and seeing him like in a coat and stuff like that. And obviously I grew up in the Caribbean, so we didn't even know what freaking coat was. And that was like the most vivid memory. And I want to say it was snowing, right? So I just remember like walking with my mom, and, she had my sister in hand, and it was snowing, and my dad was I just remember like these glass doors, and my dad was on the other side, and it was snowing. So that was my first like real vivid memory of coming to the United States.
Mm-hmm. So had your dad been here a while before you guys came?
Yeah. So the immigration process for my family, my uncle, so his oldest brother, Ricardo, he got himself in trouble a lot in the Dominican Republic. So in trouble in a sense that there was like a civil war, and he was part of it and so forth. So my grandma had sent him to the United States.
This is your uncle, right?
Yeah, my oldest uncle. And, to just do a better life so that he doesn't get himself in trouble and so forth. And he was living in the Bronx. And then we had more family immigrate. So like from my other uncle's ex-wife, her brothers came and stuff like that. So at that point, it was one of those things that it was like the American dream. And, you can make people thinking that you make millions of dollars as soon as you hit the US. Mm-hmm. And I guess my dad, he was like a sales person in Dominican Republic, and they had like a sales business and so forth. And he was just looking for an opportunity to make more money. And he followed along in, his brother's footsteps. When he moved He moved to the 158th Street, which is where my aunt, I call her my aunt, her brother were staying at, and her whole family was close to there. So he had gone in front just to make sure that, hey, like, can we actually make a life for the family and so forth? So, but he came in a traveler's visa, and then shortly after, I want to say about 6 months to a year afterwards, we came over, and my sister wasn't even a year, and that's how we came over to the United States.
So when you left the Dominican,
yeah,
do you remember, like, did your mom ever have a conversation with you, like, hey, we're going on a trip, or was she like, we're moving?
Yeah, you see, I was too young. I don't remember that part, right? So like, but it was just like when you came into this country, it was just hard work from the beginning. Like I remember, so it was two buildings where we lived, and we had family on both sides, right? So like my cousins lived in the building next to us, and the place where I grew up at was in the fourth floor. And one of the memories that I remember, the apartment was full of garbage. So literally like floor to ceiling garbage bags. And my uncle said, look, like this apartment's there, we can figure something out. So my dad and my uncle literally threw out all the garbage that was in the apartment, bag by bag, and then we were on the fourth floor, and the building only had 5 floors. And because it only has 5 floors in New York, you're not required to have an elevator. You're only required to have an elevator 6 floors and above. So they were literally like logging all of this like garbage to throw it out. And then they remodeled the apartment, painted it, put new sheetrock in, all that good stuff. And that's ultimately, kind of where we grew up living. And those are some of like the more vivid memories that I had growing up, and a lot of it. And this is why, at work, I'm always so invested into immigrants, right? Because the thing about immigrants is, unlike the newer generation who just wants to make $1 million without lifting a finger, immigrants are always willing to work. And that was in essence how I grew up, and that was and everything that I was taught and everything that I did was always you got to give it 100%, and kind of take it from there.
So you grew up in New York City, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, coming from the Dominican and New York City, two very different places. What were you thinking about? So did you guys arrive in New York City actually?
We arrived in New York City. So we came into John F. Kennedy, which is the main international airport there. Look, I would say, I mean, it's a different country, but like Dominican Republic, well, it's a big city. Santo Domingo is a city. Now, obviously, it's a Caribbean city, so there are slow components to it, but it's still a very fast city. Okay. I would say, like, growing up in New York City, I knew it was obviously different from where I grew up. It definitely makes you tough. The great part, I think there's 2 things about New York City that I truly appreciate. One is that it's extremely diverse. So I never really felt that I was an outcast. Where I grew up, I grew up in a place called Washington Heights. Now it's gentrified, but it was all just Dominicans and Puerto Ricans, right? So I never really felt like an outsider, I would say, because you would go to the supermarket or you would go to the bodega, right, in the corner, and they speak Spanish, right? So it was never that. To be honest, the only time that I've actually felt racism was when I moved to Utah, which is pretty interesting. So that's the first part that I've always appreciated about New York City. Like, you grew up in a very diverse place, and the second part of it is the fact that it makes you tough, right? Like you are forced to grow up relatively quickly, and no matter how much your parents try to baby you and keep you from getting a cut or whatever it is, like it is now with our kids here in Utah, you got to grow up because you're going to go to school, and if you don't, you're going to get bullied, right? So I think the great part about New York City is that it gives you, in essence, that grit to say, hey, you know what, doesn't matter what happens, I'm going to plow through it. So those were a couple of things that I truly kind of value from New York City. Now, the opposite side of that in New York City is you don't have that slow pace, right? So you don't take a step back to appreciate life, which is one of the things that I've loved about being here, where it's like, I leave work and I have, I'm usually 6, 7, I don't have an hour commute or an hour and a half commute. There's a lot more financial flexibility here. There's times that I'm bored. And which is, for me, is a great thing. I love being bored, because it allows you to kind of be in your thoughts and things like that. You're content with what you have. Where in New York City, it's kind of like that go, go, go. And it's always like, I need more, or you don't have enough because it's so expensive to live there. Now looking back, I kind of wish I had a place where, I had a yard growing up. Like I didn't, we grew up, it was me, my parents, and my two siblings in a 500 square foot apartment, which here it seems super small. My two siblings and I shared a room. But over there, it was kind of the normal. And that's one of the things that I appreciate here in Utah. Like my kids have their own rooms, or, they have a yard to go play at. Like we can walk around. So yeah, hopefully that answers.
Yeah. What did your parents do for work?
So my dad, backtracking a little bit, like when he first came to, he was hustling, right? Like hustling in a sense, not hustling.
Right, doing illegal
immigrants.
stuff.
It was like, oh, you're doing illegal stuff. No, hustling in terms of like he was trying to just figure out ways of making money. Like he would even like sell, whether it's selling some sort of product, legal product, like hair stuff or like cell phones or whatever that is. So he hustled a lot. Like there were even times, I know when we first moved to the US, that, my parents told me stories where he would like sleep on a train of his hard work. So he started after a while, so at one point he was like selling cell phones, and then after a while he started driving these like 14 passenger vans. And in New York, there's Massachusetts, and in Boston and in Lawrence, Massachusetts, there's a big population of Hispanics. So he would drive this van back and forth. And it would kind of suck because like their busiest time of the years are the holidays, right? Or, when people want to relax, the summertime. So like I remember you would go to Thanksgiving, and sometimes my dad wouldn't show up till like 9-10 o'clock at night because he's coming back from Lawrence. So he did that for a few years, and then after that he worked hard enough, and he saved some money to actually buy a portion of the company out. So for a few years, so after he bought it out, he did that for probably the whole time that I was a teenager. From where he owned a transportation company. Then the business kind of, doing well, but he still was doing it. He actually still has it now. And then he bought a used car dealership, had that for a few years, and kind of, then that business, he had to kind of get rid of it. And now what he does is he just has this transportation business. With my dad, he had that immigrant work ethic, and it was always go, go, go. And it was always, you always got to be better than the white man, right? Because like at the end of the day, like you're at a disadvantage, and then we were even more at a disadvantage because we were undocumented, so that, but what came with that is he didn't understand how to properly run a business, right? He wasn't educated in the US with that. So that a lot, like some of his business struggled because of that, because he mismanaged his money. It's just, it wasn't something that he grew up, being educated on.
Right.
My mom was a little bit of a different story. So my mom she was an employee throughout. So she was a salesperson at these like money transfer companies. And part of the reason that she was doing that for so long is because that was the only place that would hire her, because she was an undocumented immigrant. So, and this was in essence a 9 to 5, but my mom, because my dad was always working and things like that, like she would be the one that would have to pick us up from school, or they put us at daycare, pick us up from daycare and stuff like that, until some of these companies kind of went bankrupt and she was unemployed for a little bit and she couldn't find a job. So I want to say a lot of my college career, she didn't have a job for a number of years. And then I think once we were able to get her papers and stuff like that, she was able to get employed. But she was more of I forgot one thing. She did own, at some point, like when she couldn't find a job, she did actually own a small little boutique like shop that you can, like an internet cafe, or that you can do money transfer. She did that for a couple of years.
At what point did you realize that you didn't have legal status here?
So my parents actually did a really good job at hiding it from us. They, even though we were undocumented, I don't think we ever felt, they never made us feel poor, but not rich either, right? Like we were like, so if I wanted a baseball bat, even, he would take that and give it to us. So we didn't feel it like, it's not that they never tried to get their papers. Like they tried a number of times to get their paper, hence why they got Social Securities. I had Social Securities. And they were able to get licenses through those processes. And all they had to do was show up to the DMV and they can just renew their license when it expired. So we had cars. So it never really felt like you were poor and you were an undocumented. Right? Now we knew we didn't have tons of money, but you know what, like we were happy. Right. So I never really felt it until, so I used to play baseball growing up. I played in college, and I started playing in leagues, and I started getting better. And at one point, the teams that I was playing for, so I would play like in the Dominican league, like where there were like pretty much people that were running it were all Dominicans, and they would go to the Dominican Republic. And and this is me at 12 years old, 13 years old, and they were like, oh, are you going to go to the Dominican Republic? I was like, yeah, I want to go. So I was on the team, whatever. And then for some reason, my dad would always say, no, you can't go. It was always weird. So like, but I couldn't figure out why. Like, I couldn't figure out why I couldn't do it. Like, and I would ask him a question of like, hey, Dad, are you a U.S. citizen? And he would say, no, I'm a resident. So he would lie to us. He said, I'm a resident. That was the excuse he was giving. But so that stuff was weird, but I never really thought anything of it. It was just my parents were telling me no. Like, just like your parent, you tell your kids they want to go outside and you're like, no, you can't go outside, right? So I found it weird. And then I want to say when I was like 14, 15, I started like pressing on that issue. And I'm like, why can't we do this? Or, and I was starting to come to the age of I had to get a license. Like I was, to the point that I was going to be able to get my permit. I was like, I want to get my permit. And, and I'm having all this stuff. And then my parents actually finally sat me down and they were like, or my dad sat me down and he's like, look, the reason that you can't do that is because we don't have our residency. And, being young and naive, I was really upset about that for a few months. But luckily I had the relationship with my parents where I was matured through, and I say, okay, well, if this is our situation, how can we figure out how to make this situation go away? Where I feel like, my sister was a little bit different, right? Because, she was a little bit younger and things like that. So that was when I first found out. And then after that, things really started to say, dang, like I can't get a license, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. And, and you started being a little bit more mindful of it. But I feel what it did, it just kept adding fuel to the fire, right? And it was like, okay, well, if my parents have tried this and they haven't been able to figure this out, then I got to figure it out. Like I'm the oldest, right? I have to figure it out. I'm the one that gets good grades or whatever that is. So it just kept throwing fuel to the fire. And then everything that I was doing was to make sure that I get my papers and I get my family my papers, right? So when it came to school, I, bust my butt at school, and, I was a straight A student. And when it came to baseball, I worked hard at baseball. And, because of that, and then I was like, I want to go to school, but I can't get financial aid. I want to go to college, right? But I said, I got to figure out how to get a scholarship or figure that out. And because I was able to bust my butt, I was able to get scholarships to go to school. So like my parents, one, I was able to go to college, which was awesome. But they didn't also have to take on that financial burden by themselves, right? So, right. And that was also part of the reason why I went to 3 or 4 different schools, because I would go to one school and then I would have this other school, they would give me more money, and so forth. So what I would say is a good portion of my childhood I didn't know, and I didn't feel it. But then after I found out, I definitely started feeling it, but it really started fueling kind of my motivation to make sure that I figured this out. Because I know part of my parents' failures, and it wasn't their failures, it was, they really tried really hard. And they were actually, my parents were actually very depressed at the fact that they couldn't get it. And they weren't depressed because they couldn't get it. They were depressed because their kids, they couldn't have their kids get their papers so that their kids can then live a life here in the US, right?
Right.
And that somewhat fueled me to figure it out. And I also knew, and I was like, look, and part of this is probably language had to be about, like, language had to do something to this, right? Like an education and not understanding the system and not not understanding what you need to do probably played a role into them not being able to get their papers earlier. So I tried my best as I'm going through a situation to try to educate myself on what's happening, to get me to myself to a position that I can ultimately get my papers to help them out.
Mm-hmm. Were you ever scared? Like once you really knew, okay, I actually don't have any legal status, between that time until you actually got, your green card and eventually citizenship, like, was there any fear?
No, but because my parents raised me not to be scared of it, right? Like my parents always raised me to say, if you have an obstacle, you figure out how to get above it or get through it, right? And I was never concerned about not being able to get it. And here's what I also thought. I was like, if I can't get it, I can't build my life here. There's plenty of other countries in this world that I can move to, right? So I was never scared. I would say I was, how do I put this? I had more pressure on myself because it wasn't just me. It wasn't just me doing this for Cesar. It was me doing this for my father, for my mother, trying to get my sister in the direction, even though she's still working through it. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, she'll get her green card. That was the pressure that I got. And I've never, and in everything, like I try not to get caught up in the negative repercussions of certain situations. So I try not to say, well, if I try this and it goes bad, like I'm going to lose money. Or if I try this and it goes bad, my career is going to go down, or I'm going to lose my house. So I try my best to not really focus on those issues, because the way my mindset works is the more I focus on the solution, whether that solution works out or not, right? And if it doesn't work out, I figure out another one. I feel like the more I focus on that solution and solving that problem, the better chances I give myself on getting that problem resolved. Right. And that's what everything that I do is, and now I've tagged in, since I've been in corporate America for 10 plus years now, I've tagged in the hard work with working smart. Right. So now it's not just hard work. You got to be smart about it. So everything that I do, I put 100% effort into the solution. So that's why I wasn't fearful. So I don't think I would say I had fear. I just had pressure to succeed, but that fueled everything.
Yeah. And did your parents ever tell you why they decided to come to the US and bring all of you here?
Yeah, I mean, it's what every immigrant, I would say, from the Dominican Republic in the 70s and 80s were. Like the U.S. was, the land of the dream, right? The place where they felt that they were going to be able to raise their kids and give them a life that not only, they'll cherish, but they'll be able to be successful, right? And I have conversations with my dad about this. So my dad sometimes he feels like he was somewhat of a failure moving to this country, because he couldn't figure out the papers and it took so long, right? And he felt like he ended up being so disconnected, right? Like they went through a lot. Like my dad literally went, 20 plus years before he went to the country that he was born at. When he would see his parents or his mom, because his dad passed away when he was younger, or his brothers and sisters, they would have to come see him, right? Like my mom, her mother passed away while we were here in the U.S. and she didn't have papers, so she couldn't go see her, right? And that was like the matriarch of her family. So he's felt sometimes like he's somewhat like lost a lot of himself, and and in essence, I don't think he always puts two and two together. Like, look at how your kids are doing. I always have to constantly remind him, like, dude, like, believe it or not, the sacrifice that you made to get it here, you literally sacrificed your life to make sure that we're in the position that we're at. And yes, it took us 20 years to get to where we wanted to get, right? But look, like I tend to think I have a successful career. My sister has a career for herself. She's doing well, right? My brother, he's trying to get himself in order, right? He's a good, family person. So I have to constantly remind him of that. But that was really the reason why we came here. Now, sometimes he brings up the thing of like, but what if I would have been in the Dominican Republic? Like, who knows, right? And guess what? It is hard. Like, there's a lot of poverty in the Dominican Republic. Now, my family does decent. Not to say that I have, my mom's side, there's a few, like my uncle he has a lot of money, but but on my dad's side, it's not that way. Like, we live decent lives, right? But maybe we wouldn't have had a career. Maybe I would have been doing the 9 to 5 job that's just paying me X amount of dollars and I'm in and out, right? Where here I have a career, and I've created a value for myself, and that was all due to the sacrifices that my parents made to get us to where we're at. And then on top of that, what I also try to see him is I also try to show him now that he has grandkids, because I have 2 daughters. Now look at what you also did for your kid, for your grandkids, right? So it wasn't just what you did was just for me. It's like for generations to generations to generations, right? So what that then does for me is then it then kind of passes that torch. And this is where like the whole oldest comes in. It's like, well, if my dad and my mom did this sacrifice, then I got to do everything that I can to make sure that my kids are successful so that they can be in a better place than where I am today. Right. And then just keep passing that out. So that was really the reason why they initially I come to the country.
Was there anything growing up that you remember where it's like not necessarily a theme, but was there something that your parents always said to you that stuck with you?
Yeah, well, it's what I said earlier, and it's not the best phrase, but my dad used to always say, "You got to work harder than the white man." Right? That's how it was, and I don't know, like I know that's what he said, but what he meant was you have to work hard, and you have to do it because you're disadvantaged. Right? It is what it is. Doesn't matter whether you're undocumented, but on top of being undocumented, I'm not a millionaire. Right. I can't give you everything that you want. So that was one thing that he would always do. And it was interesting because it was really hard to please my dad. Like, it really was. Like, and sometimes I struggle with that. Like, and me not being an emotional guy, sometimes, you get in your downs and stuff. Like, so I've struggled with that in the past, but I don't with anymore. But like, it was really hard to please my dad in a sense that I remember I would go to a baseball game and I would get 2 hits. I got a 4 at bats, which in baseball is amazing. And I would come back into the car and I was getting a lecture of like, well, you could have gotten a hit here, and well, you should have ran a little bit more here, and things like that. Or, when I was in school, we didn't have A's and B's until I got it. Well, actually, no, until I got into college, we didn't have A's and B's. We had like the 100-point system, and 85 was not accepted. Like, 90 was like, okay, and 95, and even I think I got in a couple hundreds, and it was like, yep, that's your job, right? So like, it was really hard to please him. Now, he did things because my dad is always like, he's a very strong person, and it's tough for him to get emotional. He did things though in his way to try to show that, hey, I'm happy with what you're doing. Like, for example, I remember in middle school that every 90 or every grade that I got above a 90, like, I would get a video game. He somewhat does it in his own way, because it's very difficult for him to say, hey, I'm proud of you. Right?
Yeah.
He's gotten a little bit better now. He actually tells his grandkids that he's proud of them a lot more. But that was the phrase that always stuck with me growing up, that you have to work hard. And then now, as I gotten older, it's forget about the white man. You just got to always work hard. Right. But on top of that, make sure that you're working intelligently.
Yeah, I can relate to a lot of that. My mom used to, same thing. Oh, you didn't get an A, why not? And you got a B, that's not good. And it used to make me really, really mad when I was younger, because I was like, I tried, and as I got older, it turned into, weirdly, it was like motivation for me at the same time to be like, okay, well, I have to do better. And I think also what it came down to is, I think that our parents knew that we could actually be better. And so that was their weird way of motivating us, I think, to be better. And so, yeah, it used to make me really mad, but I've come to terms with it, obviously.
Here's the other thing too, though. And this is the one thing I would say about living in the United States, that in the United States, they're starting to make parenting a little bit more scientific in terms of like, you're adapting for personalities, right? Like, if this person can take you being hard, you're going to be hard. If this one can't take you being hard, you got to figure out how to motivate them without being hard. The way we grew up, there was only one way to parent. Like, that's it. Like, you're hard and that's it. Like that. And
Right.
they're going to, so, I mean, I would say, you know, to what you're saying too, like, and our parents also got lucky because we somewhat made that into something. But I tell you, like,
Yeah.
not all my siblings took it the same way. Like,
Right.
some of my siblings struggled with, you know, my dad being hard on them,
Mm-hmm.
and even my mom to an extent from time to time. Even my mom tries to be the person that's hard, but she's actually usually the softest one. But like you said, like, I feel very lucky that I had that upbringing, but I also feel lucky that I was able to stay mentally strong to actually turn that into an asset for me.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to fast forward to when you finally got to your goal of like, okay, I think I'm going to get my papers now. How did that all happen?
Yeah. So, well, one, I got to thank my wife. Because, like, so it's a long story, right? And you know, like I mentioned before, I went to a number of schools. I played baseball and all this good stuff. And going into my last year in college, I realized that I needed to get a job. You know, and it goes back to the point that I said before, like, just think about the solution and don't think about the problem, right? Because the problem is that I also don't have a paper. So, like, and sometimes, like, sometimes people get caught up on the fact that, hey, I don't have papers, so I'm not even going to apply for a job. But I felt like, you know what, I'm just going to apply and figure it out. But with that, you know, I just started going through it. I actually met my wife at during that time. You know, we fell in love, and that ended up being my avenue to getting my papers. We got married, and we submitted the paperwork. And then simultaneously, I went to school, went to the career center, try to figure out what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an engineer. I couldn't be an engineer because the schools that I went to didn't, you know, offer that. They talked to me about the company that I work at now. I didn't know it was a company. I thought it was a person. Long story short, I applied for the job. After I applied for the job, I think I got waitlisted for a little bit. And then, you know, I ended up getting the job offer, and I was loving life because I felt at that time there was like the most money I've ever seen in my life, even though it wasn't tons of money. And, you know, and again, right, like, in the back of your head, you're just like, well, I still don't have my papers. Even though I know it's in process, I still don't have it. But that being said, with the positive mindset, like I mentioned, I say things are going to happen. You're going to figure it out. And if you keep being a solution oriented person, it's going to happen. Sure enough, I got my working papers. And then a month and a half afterwards, I got my appointment.
For your interview, for your green card.
For my interview for my green card. We had our appointment.
Mm-hmm.
It was straightforward. Like, got there, they asked us like 3 or 4 questions, and the guy just like stamped me, and that was it. And I got my papers. And it was interesting because I was so in shock. Like, I was in, like, you get out of this. So we had a lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
and they come with you, right? You're used to those.
Yep.
Like, it happened. So, like, I've been waiting 18 years of my life, 18 years of my life. And I'm in this room for like 15 minutes. Not even. And then literally this guy just says, oh, you guys are good to, literally 5 seconds of him stamping the paper.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm legal. And I'm just like,
that's it.
Like, I'm literally like speechless. Like, I mean, I say thank you, obviously.
Right.
And we go to the hallway, and I'm still like, I didn't know how to process it.
Right.
It was just, and you know, and then I'm processing it, and it just wasn't. But all I remember is at a point you just breathe.
So you had been waiting for a long time to finally get your papers. Mm-hmm. And how are you feeling throughout the process? Like, once you guys hired an attorney and it was actually really happening, what were the thoughts going through your mind?
I don't know if I would say it was the best experience with the attorney. And this is primarily because you really want to get this done, mm-hmm. but you know that the attorney has 1,000,001 clients. Like, you know, I think the experience with the attorney was helpful in the fact that, like, the individual was very knowledgeable. Mm-hmm. But then it was hard, like, outside of our meetings, to get in contact with him and so forth. And you have always so many questions. Mm-hmm. Hence why I think things like this, like, are super helpful, right? Just to get some of these facts and so forth. I guess that was the one challenge. It was just like, you have so many questions, you want to get this done. Like, you know that the attorney is not going to have all the time in the world for you, and you somewhat have to like balance that out. But we felt, I think, with having an attorney, though, even though our situation was legit and we knew that we weren't going to have any problems and we were going to have all the answers to the questions, we felt more comfortable with having an attorney than not having an attorney as we were going through it.
Mm-hmm. But as far as like emotionally, what was going through your mind? Were you ever worried like, oh my gosh, this is not going to happen? Or what were you feeling?
So at this point, I was numb to this stuff, and I talked to before, like always solution based. Like, don't think about the problem. Don't think about the fact that it's going to turn out in the wrong way. Don't think about the fact. I mean, and basically the other thing I was thinking about is well, this is going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, then I'll figure something else out, right? So from an emotional perspective, I was pretty numb to it. Like I was just like I was literally just looking forward. I wasn't looking anywhere else. I think my sister's going through the same process right now. She's a little bit different. She's an emotional wreck. She's super nervous and so forth. So I think everybody's just a little bit different. But like I said, and now I'm sounding like a broken record. It was just, I always just look forward. Don't really think about things going in a negative direction.
Yeah. And sometimes I think that's what you have to do. Although, like you said, people are going to handle things differently and everyone has different emotions and things like that. But that's all. I mean, a lot of times when I talk to my clients and they're obviously worried as well, you just have to keep moving forward and keep going. I just got a card in the mail today from a client of mine. There's like a thank you card, and her immigration process was about 10 years in the making. Like I started her case 10 years ago, and there were different stages in her immigration case, but she's now finally a citizen. And so I think that I think people should know that you just have to keep moving forward, and eventually time will continue to pass. And as long as you're moving forward and doing what you need to do, it will come.
Yeah. So. And you got to keep trying. And look, the way I think about it is you either win or you tie. Now, this is another saying that my dad needs to tell me. You either win or you tie. So either you win because you get what you need where you want to be, or you tie because you end up in being in the same spot, right? Mm-hmm. So like, in essence, I feel like even though people feel like they have a lot to lose, you really don't have much more to lose because you're already losing anyways, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you have to think about getting there and continue to try. And then at some point, you then have to make a decision to say, well, am I going to keep trying or am I going to go somewhere else, right? And right. That's perfectly fine too.
Yeah.
So, that's basic. So I 100% agree with you.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier about your interview and how it all just happened very quickly and almost kind of uneventful in a way. And it's funny because a lot of my experience with my clients when I go to their interviews, like the marriage interviews, they usually come out saying the same exact thing. They're like, oh, that was not that bad at all. Like, yeah, mm-hmm. And understandably, I've been to so many different interviews, so I know what they're like. But obviously clients, that's usually their very first time. So they're always very, very nervous. Do you remember the questions that the officer had asked?
No. And I'll tell you right now, if you would have asked me that, even though this was 10 years ago, mm-hmm. if you would have asked me that 30 minutes afterwards, I would tell you the same thing. It was literally like I said, it was just mind numbing. Like you were mm-hmm. You were just like in a daze and in a zone. And I don't really remember the questions that I was asked. Now I remember some of the questions my dad was asked, mm-hmm. right? For mine, I don't really remember much of it, honestly. Like I just remember like from my interview, what I remember is sitting down, my wife sitting next to me, literally like the immigration officer, and then everything around him was just blurred out because I was just like in a daze. Mm-hmm. So I don't really remember anything from my interview in terms of questions. Yeah. Now my dad was a little bit different. Like he was asked like where I worked, because obviously I was supplying. I was his sponsor. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They asked him about where he works. They had some like just some like general information in terms of like his address and where he lives and things like that. And those were some of the questions that I remember that they asked my dad when we went.
Mm-hmm. So the day that you got approved, obviously, and then the green card got mailed to you directly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you remember that day?
Yes.
What were you feeling the moment that you got your green card in the mail?
It was, so when the green card was a game changer, right? Like now you're physically seeing yourself being a permanent or a resident of the United States of America. Now you see your like resident ID number. So you know that like, that's you're legal. So it was definitely a step. Like it felt like I'm moving now to the next step.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you still have a few more steps. So you still have to, back then, I don't know if they're still doing that now. Like I got a temporary one.
Yes.
Then I got my permanent one.
Yeah.
And then I applied. But it felt like now you're moving, right? Like before the interview, it was all like you basically just feel like you're walking on quicksand. It's kind of how it feels, right? I felt like once you got your interview, you got your stamps, everything just felt like it was moving in the direction that you wanted to go. So it was just interesting because after I got my stamps and then I got my temporary residency, the permanent one just seemed like, oh, that one's going to be easy to get, right? Mm-hmm. Where before you didn't know what was going to happen. There was just too much chance to it. So that's how I felt when I got the actual card itself.
So what he's referring to, temporary green card, and then the permanent one is 2-year green card when you're married to a citizen and you were married for less than 2 years at the time of the interview. You get a temporary 2-year card, and then later on you have to apply for the 10-year green card. So then obviously, Cesar, you got that and then applied for citizenship, and you mentioned your dad earlier. So you were then able to finally help your parents.
Yeah, so I was able to help my parents. It's funny. My dad, even though I both was applying for both my parents, the process, like my dad got an interview, but my mom got rejected. So then we had to reapply. Mm-hmm. It was very but she never got an interview then, right? Mm-hmm. Like so when after she got rejected, I forgot what we had to submit something, and then she reapplied, and then she got her green card. She didn't even need to do an interview. But it was definitely another situation where it's just like once you get through it, you're just like, well, another milestone, right? You can breathe a little bit more now that your parents have their own green card. And then, like I said earlier, I think the only one that I have left is my sister. And once my sister gets her card, then I think at that point you can then say, okay, well, now we're somewhat in this country to stay.
Yeah. So that must have been such a great feeling for you to be able to give back to your parents, right? For how much they had given to you and sacrificing so much.
Yeah. And it's a great feeling. It always is. And I tend to feel more proud of situations where I'm able to give back rather than situations where I've had my own accomplishments, and it felt great. The best part about when they got their green cards was when we went back to the Dominican Republic, and being able to see them, because I went both with my dad and my mom, being able to see them in the country that they were born and and thriving there, but also seeing them basically saying, "Man, this country's changed so much." I think it was a great experience for me, and it was one of the experiences that would hopefully stick with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Well, I think you have. I think you need to thank your wife.
I am every single day.
I hope you spoil her all the time.
I do.
But kidding aside, I mean, I'm glad that things worked out the way that they did, and for the listeners, so. As Cesar, he became a citizen, he was able to then petition for his parents, and his parents didn't have to leave anywhere. They were able to stay in the U.S. And generally speaking, if you're a citizen and your parents entered legally into the U.S., you're able to petition for your parents and they can stay here and their green cards can process.
Even though it was a tough upbringing, and I know people look at you like, oh, I feel bad that you had to go through. I was like, no, like, I think it's a big reason to why I am where I am today, and why I'm also looking forward to the future of where my family's going to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what would you say is the thing that you're most proud of accomplishing here?
I honestly, nothing of mine. The proudest moments of me, like, I don't like, I've gotten promoted and, vice presidency, like, and all that stuff. And it's all felt great. But like, for the moments that I think about are when my parents got their papers, when my brother got his GED, when my sister graduated college and she now got a job at Univision, when I was able to give my wife, like, buy her first car, or, the wedding that she wanted, right? Or the house that she wanted. So like the thing that I would say those are the moments that I'm the most proud of. And what I'm the most proud of is that I've been able to help supply that for them. Right. And even at work too, right? Like we just started this program a couple of years ago where we're able to hire at my corporation folks that don't have college degrees, right? Historically, you needed to have a college degree. And now I can bring kids that were like literally working at Cafe Rio with 2 kids and was making $20,000 a year to actually work at a corporation that gives them full benefits and actually gives them a pay bump. So those for me are what I would say I'm most proud of, that whatever accomplishments I've had, the people that I love and care about, or the community that I'm invested in, has been able to get benefits from that.
Right.
That's what I'm probably the most proud of. And I still have a lot to do. I feel like I still have, my kids, and my sister needs to get her papers. I need to get my brother to get himself a good job. That's one, because I don't really need much. Honestly, like I can be in my backyard playing music, having a beer. That's all I need. I don't need to have, I would like, we all love to have new cars and mansions. I don't need to have that. Like I somewhat live through the accomplishments of others. And that is what makes me feel fulfilled.
So my last question for you would be, because you're still very much, what's the word I'm looking for? You're still very much like you still have a lot of ties to your culture. So what would you say, and this is a question I like to ask often to my guests, is what's a cultural value that you guys have that you wish was more prevalent in America?
So what I appreciate the most about my culture is the true love and care and affection that family members show for each other. Literally, like, I have cousins that I probably see every couple of years. Now, since I moved here, I haven't seen, a little bit longer. And I see them, and it's like I've been with them my whole, like, I've talked to them every single day, right? And I talk to them on the phone, FaceTime, maybe once every few months, and it's the same thing, right? And even like I have cousins here that I literally grew up my whole entire life not knowing. And I moved here in 2015, and it's like you build this relationship with them where it's just like you truly love and care for each other, right? And I feel that sometimes is missing from American families. I feel like American families are very independent of each other. It's like, oh, yep, that's my brother, right? But they're gonna go this way and they're gonna go that way, and that's it, right? So that's the one part that I wish the U.S. had more of. But the Dominican Republic has it because it's Latin. There's a lot more passion in the Hispanic culture, right? So we're passionate about everything that we do, right? That's some of the things that I wish the U.S. had. Now, it's another thing that's what also has me worried raising two daughters, right? Like, especially here in Utah, where the culture isn't as parental. Yes, I have cousins, and yes, they have, your kids and you guys, come over and stuff like that. And we have, like, there's Dominicans here. But what I'm fearful is that they would lose that passion for everything that they do, or that sense of family, or that sense of, look, my culture is not dry. We play music, right? we're loud. We're like, that's just how we are. Like we have family gatherings, and guess what? Like, we're spending money and nobody cares, right? And they're gonna fight for the check, and you're gonna have food on the table and stuff like that. So like, that is the one thing that I'm a little bit fearful about raising my kids in Utah, that they're gonna lose out. Like, they might have had some of that in New York, just because New York, it's a very diverse state or city. Yeah. And but we'll see. We're trying our best to try to keep it at bay, and I'm sure we'll be successful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your story. I always love hearing everyone's stories because they're always so different. But also, I see a very common theme among all of the interviewees. The common theme I see among all of the interviewees is that they always knew that they would have to work hard to be able to accomplish what they dreamed of accomplishing. So, I know that you've accomplished a lot in your life so far, and I know that there's a lot more to come from you. So thank you so much for sharing.
No, thank you for having me. This was really fun. I really enjoyed it.